My brother declared at Christmas dinner, "Dad's giving me his $2 million business, you're getting cut out completely." So I revealed the contract showing I'd been the silent partner owning 60% for years. Before we dive in, please take a second to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. It means more than you know. Now let's continue this story. Christmas lights twinkled overhead as Nathan raised his champagne glass, that smug grin plastered across his face. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into Mom and Dad's house that evening. The air felt different, charged with something I couldn't name yet. My brother had been texting Dad all week, which wasn't unusual, but the secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered rooms? That should have been my first clue. "Everyone, I have an announcement," Nathan declared, standing at the head of the table where Dad usually sat. My stomach tightened. He had that look in his eyes, the same one he'd had when he told our parents I'd stolen his science project in 8th grade. I hadn't. He'd simply forgotten to do it. Dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Mom kept her eyes fixed on her plate, pushing around glazed carrots she'd spent hours preparing. My younger sister, Kiana, glanced at me with worried eyes. She knew something I didn't. "Dad's officially retiring next month," Nathan continued, his voice booming through the dining room. "And he's decided to hand over the entire business to me. Carter Logistics will finally have the leadership it deserves." My fork clattered against my plate. 23 years. I'd spent 23 years watching my father build that trucking company from a single route to a multi-million-dollar operation spanning the entire eastern region. I'd spent 15 of those years working alongside him, learning every aspect of the business while Nathan was busy partying through college and barely scraping by in his marketing degree. "What about Simone?" Kiana asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's grin widened as he turned to face me directly. "Simone." Nathan laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. "Dad's been very clear. She's getting cut out completely. No shares, no position, nothing. It's time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet instead of riding Dad's coattails all these years." The room fell silent except for the crackling fireplace. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air forced from my lungs. Cut out completely? I looked at my father, waiting for him to correct Nathan, to tell him he'd misunderstood. But Dad just sat there, staring at his turkey like it held the secrets of the universe. "Dad." My voice cracked and I hated myself for it. I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry in front of them anymore. Not after the last family meeting when Nathan convinced everyone I'd made a costly routing error that lost a major client. That had been his mistake too, but somehow I'd taken the blame. "Now, Simone," Mom finally spoke, her voice placating in that way that always made my blood pressure spike. "You have to understand, Nathan has been working very hard lately. He's shown tremendous growth and he's the logical choice to take over. You'll find your own path." Working hard? My brother had shown up to the office maybe twice a month for the past year, always with some excuse about networking events or potential client meetings that never materialized into actual contracts. Meanwhile, I'd been handling operations, managing our fleet of 67 trucks, negotiating union contracts, and personally overseeing the expansion into 3 new territories. I'd been the one taking Dad's frantic 3 a.m. calls when shipments went wrong. I'd been the one who'd mortgaged my own house to help with cash flow during the pandemic when banks wouldn't touch us. My own path. I repeated, my voice steady now, cold. Nathan leaned back in his chair, that insufferable smugness radiating off him like cheap cologne. "Yes, sis. Your own path. Maybe try retail. I hear they're always hiring. You're good with details and all that." Something inside me snapped. Not with rage but with clarity. I'd been so busy trying to prove myself to them, trying to earn their respect and recognition, that I'd forgotten what I actually knew. What I actually held in my hands. "When exactly did Dad tell you this?" I asked Nathan, keeping my voice level despite the trembling in my hands. "Last week. We had lunch, worked out all the details. The lawyers are drawing up the papers now. Should be finalized by New Year's." He took a long sip of his champagne, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. It was a power move and he knew it. I turned to my father. "Dad, did you really tell Nathan he was getting the entire business?" Dad's face had gone pale, a thin sheen of sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Now Simone, it's complicated. Nathan explained to me that the business needs a strong male leader, someone clients will respect. It's just the nature of the trucking industry. You understand. A strong male leader. The words hung in the air like poisonous gas. This was the same man who'd called me his miracle worker, after I'd personally negotiated our biggest contract with a national retail chain last year. The same man who'd told me I had a gift for logistics that he'd never seen before. The same man who'd watched me sacrifice my marriage because I'd spent more time saving his company than working on my relationship with David. If you're watching this, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. I excused myself from the table, my legs somehow carrying me through the familiar hallway to Dad's home office. My hands were steadier than I expected as I unlocked his filing cabinet with the key he'd given me years ago, the one Nathan didn't know existed. The one that said, in case anything happens to me, you need to be able to access everything. The documents were exactly where I'd filed them 7 years ago. The partnership agreement. The one Dad had insisted we create when I'd helped him restructure the business to avoid bankruptcy. The one he'd made me promise not to tell anyone about, especially not Nathan or Mom, because it would just cause unnecessary drama. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page, my hands still remarkably steady. 23 pages of legal documentation that told a very different story than the one being spun downstairs. Then I carefully returned everything to its place, locked the cabinet, and walked back to the dining room where my family sat in awkward silence. Kiana looked up at me hopefully. She'd always been the sensitive one, the peacekeeper who hated conflict. At 19 she still believed family meant something sacred, something worth protecting. I envied her that innocence. Everything okay, Simone? Mom asked, her voice dripping with false concern. You look upset. Maybe you should go home and process this news. We can talk when you've calmed down. Calmed down. As if my perfectly reasonable reaction to being erased from my father's legacy was hysteria. As if 15 years of 60-hour weeks and personal sacrifice deserved to be dismissed with a patronizing suggestion to calm down. I'm perfectly calm, I said, retaking my seat. Actually, I'm curious about something, Nathan. Nathan set down his fork, his eyes narrowing slightly. He could sense something had shifted, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. Yeah. What's that? These documents the lawyers are drawing up. What exactly do they say about the current ownership structure of Carter Logistics? I watched his face carefully, looking for any flicker of recognition or concern. He shrugged, that careless gesture that had always made me want to scream. What do you mean? Dad owns the company. He's transferring it to me. Pretty straightforward. And nobody thought to check the existing corporate structure? The current partnership agreements? Articles of incorporation? I was pushing now, seeing how far his ignorance extended. Dad's fork clattered to his plate. He knew. In that moment I saw it flash across his face. He knew what I was getting at and he was realizing his mistake. But he'd already committed to Nathan's story, already let my brother stand at his table and humiliate me. He'd made his choice and now he'd have to live with it. What are you talking about, Simone? Mom's voice had an edge to it now, that sharp tone she used when she felt I was causing problems. Stop trying to complicate things. Your father has every right to leave his business to whoever he chooses. Oh, absolutely, I agreed, pulling out my phone. His business, his choice. I completely agree with that. I'm just wondering about the parts that aren't entirely his business anymore. Nathan laughed, but it sounded forced now. What are you babbling about? Dad built Carter Logistics from nothing. Every truck, every route, every client is his. Was his, I corrected softly. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging in a way I'd never seen before. 7 years ago, I began, my voice steady and clear, Carter Logistics was underwater. You remember that, don't you, Dad? The recession hit hard. Fuel prices skyrocketed. 3 of our biggest clients went bankrupt, owing us over $400,000. The banks were circling, ready to liquidate everything. I watched Nathan's face, saw confusion flickering there. He'd been in his last year of college then, too busy with fraternity parties to notice his father's company was dying. He'd come home for Thanksgiving that year and bragged about his new car, never asking where the money came from or why Dad looked like he'd aged a decade in 6 months. Mom was talking about selling the house, I continued, looking at her now. You'd already picked out which furniture you'd take to the apartment you were planning to rent. Do you remember that, Mom? How you cried when you thought you'd have to leave this neighborhood. Mom's face had gone red, but she said nothing. She remembered. They all remembered, even if they'd chosen to forget the parts that didn't fit their preferred narrative. I'd just gotten my MBA, I said. I had job offers from 3 different logistics firms, 6-figure salaries, corner offices, the whole package. But instead I came to Dad with a proposal. I had savings about $80,000. Not nearly enough to save the company, but enough to leverage. I also had connections from my graduate program, people who believed in me, who were willing to invest if I vouched for the company's turnaround potential. Dad's eyes were open now, fixed on his plate. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his knife and fork. Go ahead, Dad, I said softly. Tell Nathan what we agreed to that night in your office. The night you cried and called me your guardian angel. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Simone brought in investors. She restructured the debt. She created the new business plan that saved everything. And in exchange? I prompted, though I already knew he wouldn't say it. He couldn't admit it out loud, not with Nathan staring at him like he'd just grown a second head. I pulled up the photographs on my phone, scrolling to the signature page. In exchange, I became a partner. Not an employee. Not a consultant. A partner with a 60% stake in Carter Logistics. Dad retained 35%. The remaining 5% went to the original investors, with a buyback clause we executed 3 years ago when the company stabilized. Nathan lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back smoothly. Don't worry, brother. I've already sent copies to my lawyer. And to the investors. And to our company's corporate attorney, who's been very interested in these recent developments. Apparently, nobody consulted him about this supposed ownership transfer you've been planning. That's impossible, Nathan sputtered, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. Dad would never. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. But Dad wasn't denying it. He just sat there looking older than his 62 years, the weight of his betrayal finally settling on his shoulders. Mom had gone completely still, her face drained of color. She was a smart woman and she was already calculating what this meant, how the story they'd constructed was crumbling. Why? I asked Dad, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. Why would you agree to this? Why would you let Nathan humiliate me like this when you knew the truth? Please share this video if you've ever felt betrayed by family. Dad finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke something fundamental inside me. It wasn't guilt or shame or even remorse. It was resentment. Pure, undisguised resentment. Because you held it over me, he said, his voice gaining strength. Every day for 7 years I had to live with the fact that my daughter owned more of my company than I did. Do you know what that feels like? To have your child swoop in and take everything you built. I laughed, a bitter sound that even I didn't recognize. Swoop in? I saved you from bankruptcy. I saved this house. I saved your reputation and your legacy. And I never once held it over you. I worked alongside you, respected your decisions, consulted you on everything. When did I ever throw the ownership structure in your face? You didn't have to, Mom interjected, finding her voice. It was always there, this unspoken power you had over your father. Do you know how humiliating it's been? Other women ask me about the business, about whether you'll take over, and I have to smile and pretend everything's normal when my daughter essentially owns my husband's life's work. The truth was crystallizing now, sharp and cutting. This wasn't about business acumen or leadership or any of the logical reasons they'd claimed. This was about ego. About a father who couldn't stand being saved by his daughter and a mother who saw my success as a personal affront to her traditional values. Nathan recovered his composure, leaning forward with renewed aggression. Okay, so you own 60%. So what? You still need Dad to run things. Without him you're nothing. The clients trust him, not you. Is that what you think? I asked Nathan quietly. That Dad's been running things these past 7 years? I pulled up my email on my phone, scrolling through hundreds of messages. Let me read you some subject lines. Emergency route planning for Northeastern Corridor. Union negotiation crisis resolution. Client retention strategy for Patterson account. Fleet maintenance optimization proposal. New territory expansion analysis. Should I go on? I looked at Dad. When was the last time you personally handled a client crisis? When was the last time you even came into the office for a full week? 2 years ago? 3. I've been mentoring, overseeing, Dad protested weakly. That's what senior leadership does. Senior leadership, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Not semi-retirement while your daughter runs the entire operation and you take credit at industry events. The words were coming faster now, years of swallowed frustration pouring out. Every award, every recognition, every article praising Carter Logistics for innovation and growth. Who do you think made that happen? Who do you think tripled our client base? Who negotiated the contracts that put us in the black? Kiana was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. She'd worked part-time in our office last summer, filed papers, answered phones. She'd seen the reality of who ran what. You did, Simone, she whispered. Everyone knows it. Even the drivers talk about how you remember all their names, their families. How you personally handled Jenkins's medical crisis when he had his heart attack. How you restructured routes so Parker could be home for his daughter's treatments. Shut up, Kiana, Nathan snapped. This doesn't concern you. But it did concern her. It concerned all of us because this wasn't just about a business or money or ownership percentages. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and cold. Nathan, you're not getting the company. You're not getting any part of the company. In fact, as of this moment, your sporadic consulting contract is terminated. Consider this your 30-day notice. Nathan shot to his feet, his chair toppling backward. You can't do that. Dad, tell her she can't do that. But I was looking at my father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. And you, Dad. We need to have a very serious conversation about your role moving forward. As the majority shareholder, I've been more than generous, letting you maintain your title and salary despite minimal involvement. But attempting to illegally transfer assets you don't own? That crosses a line. You ungrateful, Dad started, but I cut him off. Ungrateful. My voice rose for the first time. I gave you everything. My savings, my career prospects, my marriage. David left me because I was never home, because I was always at the office saving your company. I've missed birthdays, holidays, my best friend's wedding because Carter Logistics needed me. I've taken calls at 2 a.m, worked through weekends, sacrificed every personal relationship I had. For what? So you could hand it to Nathan as a Christmas present. The dam had broken and everything came flooding out. Do you know what Nathan did last month? He showed up drunk to a client meeting. The Patterson account, our biggest contract renewal. I had to personally apologize, take them to dinner, promise it would never happen again. You know what Nathan said when I confronted him? That I was being uptight, that business is done over drinks, that I wouldn't understand because I'm not one of the guys. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom was staring at her plate. Only Kiana looked at me, her young face anguished but understanding. I want to know when, I said quietly. When did you decide I wasn't good enough? When did being your daughter become something shameful instead of something to be proud of? Mom spoke then, her voice icy. This isn't about you being our daughter. It's about understanding your place. We raised you to be respectful, to honor your parents, to understand that family has a natural order. Nathan is the eldest son. That means something in our community, in our church. Your father needs someone to carry on the Carter name properly. The Carter name, I repeated slowly. The name that would have been foreclosed on if not for me. The name that would mean nothing if I hadn't rebuilt its reputation from the ground up after Dad's mismanagement nearly destroyed it. I stood, gathering my coat and purse. I'm leaving now. Nathan, you have 30 days to remove your belongings from your office. Dad, my lawyer will be in touch about restructuring your employment agreement. We'll establish clear duties, clear hours, and clear compensation that actually reflects your current contribution. Mom, I hope your friends at church are worth what you're losing tonight. And what are we losing? Mom asked snidely. You're nothing without this family. I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at them one last time. The Christmas tree lights still twinkled merrily, casting cheerful shadows across their faces. A mockery of everything this holiday was supposed to represent. You're losing me, I said simply. I'm done. Done trying to earn your approval, done sacrificing myself for people who see me as less than. Kiana, you're always welcome in my life, at my home, in my heart. The rest of you, enjoy your Christmas. I hope Nathan's masculinity and your social standing keep you warm at night. If this story resonates with you, please leave a comment about your own experiences. The next 3 weeks were brutal. My lawyer confirmed what I already knew. The partnership agreement was ironclad. Dad had no legal right to transfer anything without my consent. The attempted transfer had actually violated several clauses in our agreement, clauses that gave me grounds to buy out his remaining stake at a predetermined formula price that was significantly below current market value. Nathan tried calling 17 times before I blocked his number. The 18th call came from Mom, screaming about how I was destroying the family, how I was breaking my father's heart, how the church ladies were asking questions she couldn't answer. I listened to the entire voicemail once, then deleted it and blocked her too. Kiana came to see me on New Year's Eve, her eyes red from crying. They're saying terrible things about you. Nathan is telling everyone you stole the company, that you manipulated Dad when he was vulnerable. Mom's telling the family you've always been selfish and difficult. I held my baby sister while she cried, stroking her hair like I'd done when she was little and had nightmares. I know, sweetie. I know. But their narrative doesn't change the truth. And the truth is, I don't need them to validate my worth anymore. What are you going to do? She asked. I'd been thinking about that question constantly. The easy path would be to buy out Dad completely, push him into full retirement and take over entirely. I had the legal right and the financial means. But that felt hollow somehow, motivated by hurt rather than principle. I'm going to do what's right for the company, I said finally. I'm going to protect the employees who depend on us. The 67 drivers and their families. The office staff. The clients who trust us. That's what matters. 6 months later, I sat in the newly renovated conference room of Carter Logistics. Our company name remained unchanged. I saw no reason to erase Dad's legacy entirely, but the leadership structure had been completely transformed. I'd promoted 3 longtime employees to management positions, people who'd proven their dedication and competence over years of service. Dad still came to the office twice a week, but in a clearly defined consulting role with a reduced salary that matched his actual contribution. He'd aged visibly, the weight of what he'd tried to do and what he'd lost hanging heavy on him. We were civil, professional, but the warmth was gone. That father-daughter bond had been severed as cleanly as any legal contract, and I'd learned you can't rebuild trust that's been so thoroughly betrayed. Nathan had found work at a competing logistics firm, though I heard through industry connections that he was struggling. Turned out networking and schmoozing only got you so far when you actually had to perform. Mom had stopped speaking to me entirely and I'd made peace with that loss. Kiana visited regularly and I was helping her pay for college, business school ironically enough. She wanted to learn to build her own empire, not inherit someone else's. The painful truth I'd learned was this. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the first ones to put conditions on that love. Sometimes family isn't about blood but about who shows up, who values you, who sees your worth. I'd spent years trying to earn my father's respect and my mother's approval, sacrificing pieces of myself on that altar. The real tragedy wasn't that they'd tried to take my business. It was that they'd revealed how little I meant to them beyond what I could provide. And while that knowledge broke my heart, it also freed me. I wasn't their miracle worker or their guardian angel anymore. I was just Simone Carter, a woman who'd built something remarkable and would keep building it with or without their blessing. Some nights I still cried, grieving the family I'd wanted but never really had. But most nights I slept soundly, knowing I'd chosen my own worth over their approval. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift I could give myself. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and finding strength in difficult situations. Your worth isn't determined by who acknowledges it.